courtroom was buzzing with anticipation, the air thick with tension, like everyone there could feel something about to explode. No one had ever seen someone walk into Judge Judy's courtroom with such a mix of arrogance and casual disregard. 16-year-old Kayla Thompson strode in, AirPods in, phone in hand, her designer backpack slung over one shoulder. She didn't look at the elderly woman sitting on the plaintiff's side. She didn't even glance at her mother, who trailed behind nervously. Kayla's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, a sound that seemed to mock the seriousness of the courtroom itself. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow, as she always did when someone underestimated the gravity of her court. She had been through thousands of cases, seen every form of entitlement, deceit, and manipulation. But there was something about Kayla's confident indifference that immediately told Judy this case would not be ordinary. The bailiff called the court to order, but all eyes were already glued to the teenager who seemed to believe she was untouchable. Kayla's mother, Denise Thompson, whispered frantically, trying to get her daughter to sit properly, to remove the AirPods, to act like this was serious. But Kayla shrugged her off, scrolling through her phone, giggling at videos that had nothing to do with the courtroom or the proceedings. Judge Judy's piercing gaze cut through the distraction instantly. Kayla looked up for the first time, just long enough to realize she was being scrutinized, and then quickly dropped her gaze back to her screen. The plaintiff, Mrs. Lorraine Hayes, a retired school principal in her 70s, had spent 30 years shaping young minds, instilling discipline, patience, and respect. She had always believed in second chances, but she wasn't prepared for what Kayla had done, or the total lack of remorse that followed. Lorraine's hands were trembling slightly as she clutched her folder of evidence, filled with photographs, receipts, and statements that chronicled the relentless harassment and damage Kayla had caused. Her garden, her pride, her sanctuary, had been destroyed not once, but multiple times, and all while being recorded for social media. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the room. "Mrs. Hayes, tell me exactly what happened," she said, her tone both calm and razor-sharp. Lorraine took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Your Honor, it all began a year ago when Kayla moved in next door with her mother. At first, it was minor loud music, basketballs bouncing against the fence during my morning garden routine. I tried to be patient. I reminded myself children have energy, they're learning boundaries. But over time, it escalated. Kayla started leaving trash in my garden, cutting flowers and posting videos online mocking me, laughing at my accent, my age, even the flowers that my late husband and I had nurtured for decades." Kayla rolled her eyes dramatically, one AirPod still hanging from her ear. Her mother reached over, trying to whisper a correction, but it was clear that she had lost control. Judge Judy observed everything silently for a few moments, cataloging Kayla's body language, the dismissive gestures, the subtle smirk that betrayed her complete lack of respect. Judy had seen thousands of defendants, but the combination of entitlement, privilege, and deliberate cruelty was something she never underestimated. Lorraine continued, her voice breaking slightly. "And then 3 weeks ago, the final straw. Kayla recorded herself pouring chemicals on my prized roses, my husband's legacy, and posted it online with captions mocking me. It wasn't just destruction, it was deliberate humiliation. I tried to resolve it peacefully, but it became clear she had no intention of taking responsibility." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "And your daughter? Or rather, your defense?" she said, glancing at Denise Thompson. Denise looked like she was trying to keep her composure, but failed visibly. "Your Honor, Kayla? She's a good kid. She didn't mean any harm," Denise said quickly. "We've spoken at home. I've explained why she should apologize. She understands her mistakes." Judge Judy's voice cut through the attempt at mitigation. "Ma'am, a good kid doesn't destroy someone else's property for views on social media. And your explanations aren't helping. You've been enabling her, letting her believe that consequences are negotiable. Do you understand how serious this is?" Kayla, for the first time, glanced up, clearly irritated at being interrupted. "It's not a big deal. They're just flowers," she muttered, smirking. The courtroom collectively gasped. Mrs. Hayes's hands clenched tightly around her folder. Denise Thompson looked mortified. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed further, that signature look of controlled fury that could silence a room in seconds. Not a big deal, Judy repeated, her voice dropping into a quieter, deadly calm. Not a big deal. You deliberately destroyed someone's property, caused emotional pain, and documented it for entertainment. Do you understand that what you did is not just wrong, it's cruel? Kayla shrugged, and the smirk didn't leave her face. I mean, it's just a prank. Everyone does it. Judge Judy leaned forward, hands on the bench, voice sharper than ever. Young lady, you are not above the law. You are not untouchable. And this courtroom is not a playground. You will learn that actions have consequences whether you like it or not. For the next several minutes, the courtroom became a storm of tension. Judge Judy asked Kayla about her social media posts, the number of followers, the pattern of harassment, the previous incidents that Denise Thompson had tried to cover up with gifts and apologies to neighbors. Each revelation made Kayla's smirk fade slightly, replaced by the first hints of unease. Denise whispered frantically again, trying to control the situation, but it was clear her attempts had failed long ago. Lorraine Hayes, meanwhile, presented her evidence systematically. The photographs showed the garden before and after each post Kayla had made online, and statements from neighbors describing similar patterns of harassment. Judge Judy's team had already reviewed the evidence, confirming that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a sustained campaign of deliberate disruption and humiliation. As the minutes passed, the courtroom watched Kayla's confidence waver. Her entitlement, privilege, and dismissiveness that had filled the first moments of the case were now cracking under the weight of truth. Judge Judy's gaze remained fixed, unwavering, as if silently cataloging every misstep, every evasive glance, every half-truth told by both Kayla and her mother. Finally, Judge Judy leaned back slightly, her tone calm but unyielding. Young lady, it's clear you believe your online presence makes you immune to accountability. It doesn't, and it never will. You are about to face the consequences of your actions. And I assure you, they will be meaningful, they will be precise, and they will be unforgettable. Kayla swallowed, her hands fidgeting, the first real fear of the day crossing her face. The audience shifted in their seats. Even Denise seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that this was bigger than a lecture or a minor fine. This was a moment that would define her daughter's understanding of responsibility. Judge Judy's piercing gaze swept the courtroom. Mrs. Hayes, she said finally, you will receive full restitution for your losses, and additional measures will ensure this behavior cannot continue. Young lady, prepare yourself. Today is a masterclass in accountability. And with that, the room settled into a heavy silence, the kind that precedes a storm. The next 8 minutes would mark a turning point, not just in the case, but in Kayla Thompson's understanding of consequences, and the courtroom knew it. Asterisk, the courtroom remained tense. Every eye fixed on Kayla as Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her expression sharpening. Young lady, she said, voice calm but deadly, I want to know why you thought it was acceptable to post videos of yourself destroying someone's property. Explain that to me. Kayla shrugged, trying to mask the tremor in her voice with bravado. It was just for fun. People laugh at it online. It's what everyone does. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. Just for fun? You call systematically ruining 40 years of someone's life fun? Her tone carried the kind of disbelief that made the room fall completely silent. Do you even understand what you destroyed? Not just flowers, not just plants, but memories, love, and effort that cannot be replaced. Mrs. Hayes' hands shook slightly as she opened her folder again, pulling out photographs showing the progression of the garden over decades. Each picture told a story, her husband planting new roses, her tending the soil every morning, their shared life represented in vibrant blooms. Your Honor, she said, voice breaking, these weren't just plants. Each rose, each bloom, was part of our life together. He planted them, nurtured them, and now they're gone. My mornings, my connection to him, my peace all destroyed. Kayla shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the first flicker of doubt crossing her face. Her mother, Denise, whispered urgently, "Sit still, Kayla, just behave for a minute." Kayla rolled her eyes but didn't respond. She was slowly realizing, perhaps for the first time, that this wasn't a game. Asterisk Judge Judy's gaze softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Ma'am," she said to Denise, "your daughter is 16. She understands right from wrong. Age does not excuse malicious behavior. You've been letting her believe she can act without consequences, and that ends today." Denise swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I thought I was guiding her. I've tried to explain. I've tried to show her that she should apologize. You thought enabling her would work?" Judy interrupted sharply. "You thought ignoring her destructive behavior, paying off neighbors, covering for her mistakes, would somehow teach her lessons? It hasn't. It has made her worse." Kayla's smirk faded entirely. Her fingers fiddled with her phone, which she had been holding the entire time. She tried to focus on a screen, but found her attention pulled into the gravity of the courtroom. Every word Judge Judy spoke felt like a hammer striking at the shield of arrogance she had built around herself. Judge Judy stood, leaning over the bench, her hands gripping the edge. "Young lady," she said slowly, enunciating every word, "your online fame is meaningless if it comes at the expense of other people's lives. People think views and followers make them powerful, but real power comes from respect, integrity, and accountability. You don't have any of that right now, and you will learn why in this courtroom today." The bailiff shifted uncomfortably as the words hung in the air. Mrs. Hayes took a deep breath and continued her testimony. "I tried to handle this quietly. I didn't want to go to court. I hoped she would realize what she was doing was wrong, but it escalated. Last week, she sent me a direct message online, laughing at me, saying I was overreacting. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I spent hours cleaning up after her, buying new plants, repairing fences. I'm not wealthy, I live on my retirement, and she's taken everything I have emotionally and financially. I don't want revenge. I just want justice." Judge Judy nodded, her eyes never leaving Kayla. "Do you understand the seriousness now?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. Kayla opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her gaze darted around the courtroom, finally landing on Mrs. Hayes. For the first time, she saw the tears, the grief, and the exhaustion etched into the woman's face. It wasn't a video. It wasn't a like or a comment. It was real. And Kayla felt the weight of the reality she had tried so desperately to ignore. "You see," Judge Judy continued, "when you act with disregard for other people, when you mock, belittle, and destroy for your own amusement, there are consequences. The real world does not reward cruelty. Your followers will move on. Your so-called fame won't protect you here." Denise whispered again, but Judge Judy didn't pause. "Ma'am," she said to Kayla's mother, "your attempts to protect her from responsibility have failed. She must now understand the impact of her actions. The compensation she owes is not negotiable, nor is the lesson she must learn." Kayla's shoulders slumped slightly. Fear and uncertainty replaced the confident arrogance she had carried into the courtroom. She realized she could no longer rely on her social media followers or her mother's interventions. Every bit of her self-assured facade was crumbling, and Judge Judy was systematically dismantling it piece by piece. Then came the moment that changed everything. Judge Judy called up the video evidence, showing Kayla laughing as she poured chemicals over Mrs. Hayes' roses. The camera captured every detail: the smirk, the narration, the deliberate attention to maximizing the damage. The courtroom gasped. Denise buried her face in her hands. Kayla's face turned pale, her bravado evaporating instantly. "Do you see what you did?" Judge Judy asked, pointing at the screen. "Do you understand that this was not harmless fun? This was cruelty. And you, young lady, are fully responsible." Kayla swallowed, trying to speak, but the words failed her. She realized there was no excuse, no way to justify what she had done. Her mother tried again. "Your Honor, she didn't." Judy held up a hand. "Enough. She knew exactly what she was doing. She filmed it. She shared it publicly. This is not ignorance. This is intent. And intent comes with accountability. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Kayla looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. For the first time, the courtroom saw vulnerability behind her smirk. She was confronted not just with the evidence, but with the impact of her actions on a person she had genuinely harmed. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, scanning the room. "Ma'am," she said to Denise, "you have failed as a parent in this instance. You cannot shield her from accountability. That ends now. She will face consequences that are both fair and designed to teach her the value of respect and empathy." Kayla's first tear slid down her cheek. She finally understood in a visceral way that this was more than a lesson in money or punishment. It was a lesson in humanity. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with emotion. As everyone in the courtroom absorbed the gravity of the moment, Judge Judy's voice dropped into a low, measured cadence, the kind that commands attention without shouting. "This courtroom will not tolerate cruelty. You will restore what you destroyed, you will make amends, and you will learn that respect and accountability are not optional. The next steps will ensure that you carry the weight of your choices and understand the real cost of your actions." Kayla nodded, finally subdued, realizing that nothing she had done online could save her from the consequences now. Denise whispered apologies, not for the first time, but for perhaps the first time acknowledging her own failures as a parent. Mrs. Hayes exhaled, relief washing over her as Judge Judy meticulously outlined the restitution and conditions for Kayla. And just like that, the first wave of reckoning had begun. Kayla had crossed the threshold from arrogance to accountability, but the journey was far from over. Judge Judy's words, precise and unwavering, would guide the next stage of this transformative courtroom experience. Asterisk, the courtroom remained hushed, the weight of Judge Judy's words hanging in the air. Kayla Thompson sat frozen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the first true realization of accountability settling over her like a heavy blanket. For 16 years, she had navigated the world with entitlement as her compass, believing that social media applause could shield her from consequences. Today, that illusion was unraveling stitch by stitch. Under the relentless scrutiny of Judge Judy turned her attention fully to Kayla now, leaning slightly forward with a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. "Young lady," she said, her voice deceptively calm, "you've heard the testimony. You've seen the evidence. But I want to hear from you directly. Why did you think it was acceptable to harass and destroy someone else's property? Why did you post it online for the world to see?" Kayla's mouth opened and then closed again. She glanced at her mother, Denise, who was shaking her head, silently urging her to say something she clearly hadn't thought through. Finally, Kayla whispered, almost inaudibly, I don't know, I thought it was funny. Everyone does things like this online." Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "Everyone? Do you hear yourself? Everyone doesn't pour chemicals on 40-year-old roses that belong to someone who trusted you as a neighbor. Everyone doesn't film it, narrate it, and post it for amusement. You made a conscious choice, and that choice has consequences." Mrs. Hayes, sitting with her daughter beside her, nodded slowly. "Your Honor, it's not just about the roses. It's about the respect that was completely disregarded. Kayla mocked my life, my husband's memory, and everything I hold dear. It's terrifying that a child this young could show such disregard for another person's feelings." Kayla flinched as if struck. Her confident mask of superiority was crumbling, replaced by a mix of fear and shame she had never experienced before. Denise leaned in, whispering again, trying to soothe her daughter. But it was clear that no whisper could undo the weight of Judge Judy's words or the depth of the harm Kayla had caused. Judge Judy didn't miss a beat. "Ma'am," she said sharply to Denise, "you've spent the last year enabling this behavior. You've paid neighbors to cover up incidents, excuse suspensions at school, and allowed her to believe that online validation is more important than human decency. That stops today. She will learn what it means to be responsible." The bailiff shifted in his chair, sensing the tension radiating through the courtroom. The audience leaned forward, knowing they were witnessing not just a legal proceeding, but a moral reckoning in real time. The cameras captured every subtle change in Kayla's posture, every fleeting expression that betrayed the unraveling of her carefully constructed persona. Asterisk Judge Judy continued, her voice now carrying a measured intensity. Young lady, your actions weren't impulsive. They were deliberate. You took time, effort, and planning to maximize the destruction and humiliation. And yet, you treat it as entertainment. Do you understand that what you've done isn't simply about money? It's about trust, respect, and the basic decency you've ignored. Kayla lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of the room's attention pressing down on her. For the first time, she could see the reality of her actions reflected in Mrs. Hayes' tearful eyes. It was a mirror showing the depth of pain she had caused. A pain she hadn't anticipated when she laughed for her followers. Your Honor, Denise tried to interject. Her voice trembling, I've spoken to her. I've explained why she should apologize. Judge Judy's sharp hand cut her off. Ma'am, your attempts at mitigation only highlight the failure in parenting that has led us here. Apologies without accountability mean nothing. Words without actions are worthless. The courtroom grew even quieter. Every eye was on Kayla, who now sat rigid, her AirPods removed, and her phone hidden in her bag. She couldn't scroll, she couldn't ignore, she couldn't escape the consequences any longer. For the first time, social media had no power here. Followers didn't matter, likes didn't matter, and the virtual applause that had fueled her arrogance was irrelevant. Mrs. Hayes took a deep breath, reaching for the next piece of evidence, a timeline of the harassment that chronicled months of escalating behavior. She laid it out carefully for the court, repeated incidents of fence bouncing during morning garden hours, trash thrown into the garden, derogatory TikTok videos, and finally, the chemical destruction of her prized roses. Each entry was a stark reminder of how deliberate and relentless Kayla's actions had been. Judge Judy scrutinized the documents, her expression one of measured severity. Young lady, do you understand what you've done over these past months? This is a pattern, not a single lapse in judgment. Patterns define character. And right now, your character is under scrutiny, as it should be. Kayla's face paled. She had never been confronted like this. Every consequence she had ever faced had been temporary or negotiable. Money could erase it, an apology could cover it, her social media could distract from it, but not here. Not today. Judge Judy had stripped away every shield she had relied upon. Then came the question that made the room hold its breath. Judge Judy looked Kayla directly in the eyes. Do you understand the pain you've caused Mrs. Hayes? Not just financial pain, but emotional pain. Do you understand that you cannot buy back trust, and you cannot erase the memories you've harmed? Kayla swallowed hard. Her voice trembled, just slightly. I didn't know it would hurt this much. Judge Judy's voice softened ever so slightly, though the authority remained. It's not about thinking. It's about responsibility. Responsibility is not optional. You acted, you made choices, and now you will face the outcomes. That is the lesson you must learn. Denise's shoulders slumped as the reality of the situation hit her. For the first time, she understood that enabling her daughter had only delayed an inevitable confrontation with reality. Her attempts to protect her had been counterproductive, and Judge Judy's scrutiny left no room for excuses. Kayla's hands trembled slightly as she tried to process what was happening. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her, every face a reminder that this wasn't a digital game, that consequences weren't virtual, and that actions had real-world impacts. Mrs. Hayes' quiet dignity, her emotional vulnerability, and her unwavering presence had begun to pierce through the shield of arrogance Kayla had worn for so long. Judge Judy leaned forward again, voice low but penetrating. Young lady, restitution will be made. You will repair the damage. You will apologize sincerely without social media involvement. And most importantly, you will learn that respect is earned, not mocked, not ignored, and not destroyed for entertainment. Kayla finally looked up fully, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she saw the seriousness of her actions reflected in the eyes of every person in the courtroom. The reality of consequences, accountability, and morality was no longer abstract. It was tangible, immediate, and unavoidable. The first wave of reckoning had passed, but the journey was far from over. Judge Judy's measured yet unwavering approach had begun to break through Kayla's defenses. The next steps would be decisive, designed to ensure that lessons were internalized, not just superficially acknowledged. As the bailiff moved to organize the next phase of evidence and testimonies, the audience felt the intensity of the courtroom like a living presence. Kayla's world had shifted. She had entered with arrogance and entitlement, but she was leaving part 3 with a seed of understanding that accountability and empathy were not optional, and that Judge Judy would ensure it was learned. Asterisk. The courtroom seemed almost suspended in time as Judge Judy leaned back slightly, letting the weight of her words settle over Kayla Thompson. The young girl sat rigidly in her chair, fingers interlaced, struggling to comprehend that the walls of this courtroom could not be ignored, and that social media fame meant nothing here. Each breath she took felt heavier, as if the reality of her actions was finally pressing down on her. Judge Judy's voice cut through the silence. Young lady, I want you to understand that this is not a simple lesson in money or fines. You've crossed a line that goes beyond property. You've crossed into the realm of emotional destruction. You've mocked someone's life, their memories, their peace, and for what? Entertainment? Kayla's eyes dropped to her lap. For the first time, she felt the sting of embarrassment, fear, and shame all at once. Her mother, Denise Thompson, shifted nervously beside her, muttering something under her breath that was quickly silenced by Judy's piercing gaze. It was clear that no whispered reassurance could undo the weight of the courtroom or the impact of the evidence laid bare before them. Mrs. Hayes took a deep, steadying breath, holding back tears. Your Honor, it's not just about the roses, she said, her voice strong despite her shaking hands. It's about the message this behavior sends. That it's okay to disrespect elders, to destroy property, and to film it for laughs. It's about accountability. I've spent my life teaching children to respect others, to value community, to understand the consequences of their actions. And this is the kind of behavior that undermines every lesson I've ever taught. Judge Judy's eyes never left Kayla. Do you understand that? She asked quietly but firmly. Do you understand that what you've done is a reflection not just of yourself, but of how you've been allowed to operate unchecked? Kayla swallowed, her throat tight. I didn't mean. Judge Judy's voice cut sharply. You filmed it. You posted it. You laughed at it. Intent isn't accidental, young lady. You intended to cause distress, and you succeeded. That is not acceptable. For the first time, Kayla's defiance began to crack. Her phone had been hidden in her bag, her AirPods removed, and yet the pull of her usual bravado lingered. But the intensity of Judge Judy's scrutiny was unlike anything she had experienced online. Here, there were no likes, no hearts, no followers to validate her. Here, actions had immediate consequences. Denise attempted to interject, her voice trembling. Your Honor, Kayla is a good kid at heart. She's just immature. She didn't fully understand. Judge Judy's hand cut the air sharply. Enough. Good intentions mean nothing when they result in deliberate harm. You've enabled her immaturity, but the court will not. Kayla Thompson, you will face the consequences of your actions. And they will be meaningful. Asterisk, the audience leaned forward in their seats. The tension was palpable. Even the bailiff seemed aware that this was more than a legal proceeding. It was a lesson in morality, accountability, and the limits of entitlement. Kayla's shoulders slumped slightly as the weight of Judge Judy's words finally began to pierce through the armor of arrogance she had carried for 16 years. Judge Judy gestured to the evidence board. The screen displayed the series of TikTok videos, images of the destroyed roses, and timestamps documenting the pattern of harassment. Young lady, every one of these videos, every act of destruction, tells a story, she said. A story of entitlement, disregard, and deliberate cruelty. Do you see it now? Can you feel the impact? Kayla's lips pressed into a thin line. She tried to look away, but her gaze kept returning to the screen. For the first time, she truly saw what she had done not as a fleeting prank, but as a series of actions that had tangible, lasting consequences for another person. Mrs. Hayes' daughter, sitting beside her mother, reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "She needs to understand." Judge Judy's voice softened slightly, though the authority never waned. "Young lady, this is your moment of reckoning. You will restore what you have destroyed, not because it's convenient, not because you want to, but because it is the right thing to do. You will write a handwritten apology, devoid of any social media influence. You will work directly with Mrs. Hayes to make restitution. And you will learn, in no uncertain terms, that respect is earned, not mocked." Kayla's eyes welled with tears. She had never been confronted like this, not in school, not at home, not in any digital forum. The combination of Judge Judy's unwavering authority, Mrs. Hayes' quiet dignity, and the undeniable evidence left her trembling. She realized that for the first time she could not manipulate the narrative, hide behind excuses, or rely on the fleeting validation of online followers. Denise finally broke down, her sobs barely contained. "I just wanted her to like me. I thought being her friend would help. I didn't know how to." Judge Judy cut her off gently but firmly. "Ma'am, parenting is not about friendship. It's about guidance, boundaries, and accountability. Your failure to enforce those has contributed to what we see before us. But we are here now to correct it." The courtroom remained silent, every person in the room feeling the gravity of what was unfolding. Kayla's transformation had begun, not fully, not yet, but the first seeds of understanding were planted. She realized, with each passing moment, that actions have consequences, that privilege cannot shield one from responsibility, and that empathy is not optional. Judge Judy's next words were deliberate, measured, and penetrating. "Kayla Thompson, restitution is not optional. You will personally restore Mrs. Hayes' garden under supervision. You will work a set number of hours, ensuring that every plant, every flower, every element is treated with care. You will not use your phone during this time. You will not involve social media. And you will reflect on the choices that brought you here." Kayla nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she felt the weight of accountability, the magnitude of responsibility, and the importance of empathy. She had entered the courtroom with defiance and entitlement, and now she was beginning to understand what it truly meant to face consequences. Mrs. Hayes exhaled, relief washing over her. The anger and frustration that had built up over months of harassment began to release. For the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope that this young girl could, perhaps, learn to respect others, value empathy, and understand the consequences of her actions. Judge Judy's gaze swept the courtroom one final time. "This is more than a legal judgment," she said. "It is a lesson in morality and accountability, and in the consequences of treating others with cruelty. Let it be remembered, young lady, that respect is earned, not demanded, and actions, especially harmful ones, cannot be undone with a swipe or a post. You will learn this lesson, and you will carry it with you." Kayla sat quietly, absorbing the gravity of the sentence. Her world had shifted irrevocably. The courtroom was no longer a place of abstract rules or distant authority. It was a space of reflection, consequence, and real human accountability. The journey was far from over, but the first phase of transformation had begun. The following weeks were tense for Kayla Thompson. Gone were the days when her phone ruled her life, when every action was measured in likes and views. Now, every decision carried weight, every movement was scrutinized, and the reality of consequences settled heavily on her shoulders. Judge Judy's ruling had been clear. Restitution, accountability, and empathy were not negotiable. On the first Saturday of her mandated community service, Kayla arrived at Mrs. Hayes' garden with a sense of dread that no TikTok follower could alleviate. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint fragrance of the remaining blooms, and Mrs. Hayes stood there with gloves and a small watering can, her face calm yet resolute. She gave no warm smile, no comforting words. There was no reward, only the expectation of diligence, reflection, and hard work. Kayla shuffled her feet, avoiding eye contact. Good morning, she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Mrs. Hayes nodded. Morning. Let's get started. I'll show you what needs to be done. The garden was a testament to decades of love and care. Even in its partially destroyed state, it radiated history, patience, and devotion. Kayla's eyes lingered on the blackened stems of the roses she had killed, and for the first time, she felt true remorse. This was not a digital game. These were not pixels or followers' comments. This was real, and she had caused real pain. For the next 4 hours, Kayla worked silently. She dug, pruned, cleared, and replanted under Mrs. Hayes' watchful eye. Her hands grew sore, her knees ached, and the sun beat down relentlessly. There were no likes, no followers, no applause, just hard work and the weight of accountability. With each rose she tended, she felt the invisible tension of Judge Judy's words echoing in her mind. Respect had to be earned. Empathy cannot be faked. Actions had consequences. At the midpoint of the morning, Kayla finally spoke. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't understand how much this garden meant to you. I was wrong. Mrs. Hayes paused, studying the girl. It's not just about saying sorry, she said firmly. It's about showing it. Words mean little if they're not backed by actions. You have a lot to learn, Kayla. Kayla nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. She had learned that lesson the hard way. Over the course of the next several Saturdays, the transformation became more than physical labor. It became emotional, psychological, and moral. She learned to slow down, to notice the delicate nature of life, and to value care over convenience. She began to ask questions, not to mock, but to understand. Why do you prune this way? She would ask, why does this soil matter? And Mrs. Hayes, patient yet firm, explained everything, teaching not just about plants, but about patience, effort, and respect. By the fourth Saturday, Kayla's posture had changed. She no longer slouched, she no longer muttered complaints under her breath. She approached the garden with focus and care, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. She began to see that the garden was not just about flowers, but about history, love, and the lives that had been intertwined with each rose bush. Each blossom, each leaf. During one session, Mrs. Hayes paused and looked at Kayla. Do you know why I insisted you come here instead of just paying a fine? She asked. Kayla shook her head, still focused on aligning the new rose cuttings, because lessons that are felt with the hands, the back, and the mind are remembered. You can delete a video, erase a post, but the pain you cause someone else stays. You have to feel it, work through it, and then make it right. That's how growth happens. For the first time, Kayla truly listened. She didn't roll her eyes, didn't shrug. She absorbed the words, letting them sink into her consciousness, letting them challenge the arrogance and entitlement that had defined her. On the seventh Saturday, something remarkable happened. Kayla began to smile, not mockingly, not arrogantly, but genuinely. She had started seeing the tangible results of her work, new shoots, healthy soil, and the faint green of life returning to the blackened areas. But more than that, she felt a subtle shift within herself. The joy of creation, the satisfaction of mending what she had destroyed, was far more enduring than any temporary social media applause she had ever received. The final Saturday arrived, and Judge Judy's instructions were clear: completion of restitution, reflection, and a final handwritten apology. Kayla arrived with the letter in hand, her hands shaking slightly, but her resolve firm. She approached Mrs. Hayes, who was kneeling in the garden, inspecting the last of the replanted roses. Mrs. Hayes, Kayla began, voice steady, I want to apologize again. I understand now what I did was wrong, and I see the damage I caused. I didn't just destroy plants. I hurt someone I should have respected. I'm truly sorry, and I want to make sure I never do this again. Mrs. Hayes studied her, seeing the genuine remorse reflected in the girl's eyes. She nodded slowly. Kayla, this is a start. Actions, not just words, define a person. I see that you've worked hard, not because you had to, but because you understood why it mattered. That is the lesson you needed. Kayla exhaled, a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced the full consequences of her actions and emerged not broken, but transformed. The garden, once blackened and lifeless, now glimmered with new life, each bloom a testament to patience, accountability, and growth. Denise, watching quietly from the side, finally understood the depth of her mistakes as a parent. She had tried to shield her daughter from the world, from rules, from responsibility, but Judge Judy's firm hand, combined with the moral weight of the process, had done what years of permissiveness could not. She realized that parenting was not about being a friend, but about guiding, teaching, and sometimes allowing consequences to shape character. Asterisk, as Kayla left the garden that final day, she didn't look at her phone. She didn't think about followers or likes. She walked with purpose, carrying a new understanding of empathy, respect, and the real value of her actions. Weeks later, back in school, Kayla's transformation became evident. She treated peers and teachers with more consideration. She apologized for past misbehavior, and she no longer sought validation through shortcuts or cruelty. Her online presence was subdued. Her focus shifted from entertainment to authenticity. Judge Judy's ruling had done more than deliver justice for Mrs. Hayes. It had recalibrated the trajectory of a young girl's life, demonstrating that accountability, when applied with precision, empathy, and firmness, can create lasting change. The courtroom had not just punished. It had educated, transformed, and restored balance. Kayla Thompson emerged from the experience forever changed. Social media no longer dictated her actions. Empathy and respect became her guides, and the garden she had once destroyed became a living reminder of the lessons learned, that actions have consequences, that people matter, and that redemption is possible when one confronts the truth of their behavior with sincerity and effort. By the end of this journey, both Mrs. Hayes and Kayla shared a quiet mutual understanding. The garden, restored and blooming, became a symbol not just of restitution, but of growth, transformation, and the enduring power of accountability. And in a quiet corner of her home, Judge Judy's words echoed: respect is earned, empathy is taught, and consequences are the bridge between arrogance and understanding. Asterisk.